Test, test, test. Testing, test. Mhm.
Yeah, it was asking for the hours. I just didn't know if it was like the total hours that I've been happening here in the SAC or the hours that I'm doing right now. Like I put the total,
What does it say?
just total hours. But I don't know if it's between other colleges, Naver and SAC. I just got confused. I put the 40
Yeah,
hours.
I'd put the total and then, some are at SAC, some are at the other. But yeah, I think that means definitely all
Oh,
calls.
okay, okay, these are the hours I've been doing. Thank you.
Test, test. Sweet. Mm, and now to record my screen. I used to be so good at this. Yep. It's funny how much it's updated since actually. Mhm, mhm, mhm. Not just to record. Oh, I guess it is recording. The real question would be, can I run Revit at the same time? Post office supposed to come in today and observe. However, I guess we're still waiting for some. However, there's a couple things to go over today, guys. Obviously, I want to try some more recording software and see if I can get a decent recording out of this. But also we need to see the sketches of what maybe your designs are, right? For your little studio house. It could be quite simple. It could be a square. Like I said, design isn't going to be obviously the intent of this project. However, get those on Miro week 15 as soon as possible. It could be just, a picture of your sketches or if you want to get it scanned, that's fine too. Actually, phones are pretty good at scanning these days. As long as you have some good lighting. But we'll give it a couple minutes, see if we get started. Obviously, you guys probably have way more to think about than computer graphics right now. Totally get that, but we can't let it fall by the wayside. So Well, we'll give it 5 minutes. Figure out if we can get this one. That's always. Was anybody there? About another minute. Thanks for your patience, guys. Definitely should be enough time to get, open up started or even posting your photos. All right. That's something for manager. Well done. That's exactly what we're looking for. Now, if we could just get the rest of it. Well, we're just not getting started. I was kind of waiting for I mean, I had 7 students and I had 3 of them in days this week, but the show is to go on. It's already only next week. It's Tuesday, Thursday next week. I'm afraid it might be worse. Because these are my before guys too. But yeah, we can go ahead and get started, guys. I am trying out a new recording software. We're going to try Zoom today and hopefully get a recording. However, just in case you missed it, guys, do go ahead and put your sketches maybe in the background as we discuss our part 3 to Revit. And as you guys know, there's a lot to it. So these could easily become hour-and-a-half videos, and I choose to sort of spread them out a little bit easier. They're a little bit more digestible at 45 minutes apiece. However, thank you, Andrew, for getting your sketches up. It would be nice to maybe get some dimensions or some ideas about that. Obviously, Revit's going to do a lot of that for you. That you have a basic shape, I think that's okay. You know, you're starting to look at the elevation. Again, exactly what I asked for. And this project isn't exactly about design, right? It's really about learning the technicalities of this program and the way that it wants you to input information, right? So it's definitely not a bad thing to have on your side, kind of as a guidance, right? Which is really the point. However, Leah, you know, I know Haley, Miguel have something. Luke is no longer, he's off to bigger and better things. That's okay. However, let's continue. Right. So if you want to get that in the background, and just to kind of review where we were at last time, right? So in the first video, we definitely talked about the user interface of Revit, right? And all the many buttons that you have the ability to click on. In the second one, we talked about, of course, establishing a foundation. So we made the topography surface, then we made that building surface in terms of the foundation. Then we started making the walls, we started making the roofs, and of course the windows. And we briefly talked about furniture last time with BIM object. So we're obviously just going to continue because in our case, we do still need to make some plans and we still need to establish some of the graphics. I wanted to show you that sometimes actually Revit can slow down, especially once the model starts getting pretty heavy. So I wanted to show you that there was different view modes in this bottom piece. Now it's kind of hard to see on the projector unless I kind of highlight over some things, right? You can start to see some of those elements. But I did want to show you that you can choose between shaded and hidden line to, of course, effectively help your CPU run a little bit better while you're running this Revit project. However, it's a lot easier to see, at least in the projector. So I'll stick in shaded for today. But you'll notice definitely the computer struggles a little bit more in terms of that loading time. One thing that I forgot to point out is you'll notice as you move, right, or even pan, you'll notice that the hatching goes away. And that's really to save your CPU, right? So it's constantly trying to help your computer out, if that makes sense, right? Anyway, we got the roof. We've got different layers of structure to that roof. We talked about a little bit about the floor structure last time. I think today, let's go ahead and actually put some of that furniture or some of these special components that we were mentioning last time. I mentioned that I had a couple loaded, such as a chair, a toilet, or water closet, and of course a TV. But as you know, there's tons of different items, and we were taking a look at it last time. So let's take a look at it again. Of course, it's BIM object, just in case you didn't write it down. BIM, right? In our case, you know, it's a matter of basically a search engine for the things that we need. So for instance, a chair, right? We can type in chair, and there's just about every chair you can think of. Maybe even some chairs that you've never even seen. But in our case, we know that we can use this a little bit more effectively. We can select Revit in terms of our file type. That way we know that the model is available for the program that we're using. You'll see Rhino in there and of course, lots of other programs. So again, this is not just for Revit. Another website I did want to show you that I didn't get to mention last time was called Revit City. However, this one is actually based in the UK and it loads kind of slow, right? Obviously because it's a larger distance away. And as you can see, even me clicking on it, it kind of just, it's a different server and it loads a lot slower. However, this is much more like people made these parts themselves, right? This is more like, say, students of architecture, say they made a pool table, sometimes those are available. So just in case you couldn't find it on BIM Object, you can definitely find it also in Revit City. So those are definitely two great websites to write down in terms of finding these models. So I'm just going to take a chair, right? Let's go ahead and click on this chair. It looks nice. I'm going to go ahead and click download. And you'll see that it actually has quite a few files, right? We don't need all these files, so I'm going to deselect all. Obviously, I don't need 3ds Max or SketchUp. In my case, I just need this Revit file. And you'll notice there's actually a couple of Revit files. We talked about this last time, that there's a Revit family type. This is a catalog where they probably have multiple chairs at multiple specifications and sizes. Not exactly what we need either. However, if we were doing a construction document, maybe, right? So definitely good to be aware. However, for this little studio project, I'll just use a regular Revit. I'll get my face out of the way so I can download it. And we'll stick it on our downloads. Actually, that chair looks pretty nice too. Why not? Right? Go ahead and download it. Again, I want to find that Revit file. It's not always in the same spot. These are, of course, made by different people and different companies. So go ahead and download that one. Wonderful. And they're free. I mean, could you ask for a better digital model, right? Some, they actually do charge you for them. I wouldn't pay for them, especially not in studio. There's so many free available. And at the end of the day, you could even make your own, which I hope to not cover making our own chairs today, but do want to show you how Revit handles that, right? So we do have our downloads, and how we get them into the project is actually somewhat tricky. Like I said, Revit is more like a catalog system. So, well, if you're adding something to its catalog, it wants to make sure it's in the right place, right? So you'll notice actually when I click on some of these elements, such as say a window, right? You'll see to the far right, it says load a family, right? However, the load family button isn't the same for the doors as it is the same for the windows, even though it looks the same, right? So if I go to architecture and I say go to doors, right? It has the load family button again, but it's not the same. I can't load a window into the door category. I can't load a door into the window category. That's really important because the first thing you're going to get from Revit is an error message saying, hey, it's in the wrong category, right? Category error. So at least in my case, well, this isn't a door or a window. So what do? Well, it's known as a component. So in my case, the shortcut key for that is CM, as in Charlie, and what is it for M? Mike, right? Charlie Mike. So we'll hit CM, and actually that'll bring up our components category, which is essentially more universal, right? I can kind of bring in a door to the universal part. It's kind of strange. Like I said, it's a catalog, and it is trying to keep things in order. But as you can see, I have many different items, such as a TV and really just kind of third-party objects. So in my case, I want to load from family. I'll go ahead and click on that and find my downloads. So in my case, I'm on my Windows side. It's a little bit different. Bear with me. I got to find my downloads. There it is. And of course, we'll find our chair and that furniture sofa that we found. So we just need to double click. And the first thing it's going to do is actually change it from a 2017 model to a 2023 model. Not super important, but it does take a couple seconds. But once it's finished, you'll start to see it render into the three-dimensional, right? It starts as a wireframe. I can hit spacebar and rotate it, which is really nice. While I'm in this process, I could even double click on floor plan and switch to that, right? However, it's going to unlock that previous command that I gave it. So I'd hit CM again. And it's of course going to load that previous component that I had originally, which is pretty nice. I don't know about you, but now I don't have to draw an entire couch. It's as simple as, well, move and click. The best part is I don't even have to really decide where it goes now. Once it's in the model, I can just simply drag it. I could also use my arrow keys to, of course, dial it in a little bit more. And if I really wanted to be OCD about it, I could even make a perfect alignment with some of the elements of the chair. Right? Just in case I wanted to. Okay, so we got some chairs. There's, of course, many other components and many that I've actually already loaded inside this template file. So shouldn't be too bad there. We got some pieces. I think the next thing, that we just still haven't covered, is definitely sections, right? So that's a huge part. And just like our elevations that we spoke about last time, we're going to find it in our views tab. So I'm going to wait for Zoom to get out of the way. And we'll go to our view tab. And it's, of course, where we find our plan views, our elevations, but also our sections. After all, it is a view. And what's even better is I can just start slicing through this thing all day long, right? In my case, I'm just going to get the long and the short. I think I want to get through those stairs so we can kind of see what that's doing. Now, this is kind of the beauty of Revit, right? I can simply just move the section. And to be honest, it's magically going to change that viewport, right? So again, just like the elevations, we can double click on the blue parts of that annotation. And voila, section. Now that's not exactly a section with good qualities yet, right? It doesn't have any poche, it doesn't have any line weight. It is just sort of automatically generated that view for us. Now, if I hit WT so that we can see all of our windows, I want you to see it in real time. Now, it's not going to do so much to our digital model. However, take a look at this section as I move this section bar. So once I move it, it immediately updates that view. This is really helpful, guys. I mean, don't get me wrong. Yeah, I used to use this in Studio to kind of just get my square footages, establish my levels, and possibly even my grid so that I could print it out and refine it, right? At least that's what I would suggest in a studio environment, just because, again, Revit is more of a construction document generator than it is a studio model generator. That's of course why we look at Rhino, right? And we look at all the many things that we can do in Rhino. However, I would say for Revit, it's not my cup of tea, even though there are certain designers that use Revit differently, right? I will say, at least as a disclaimer, this is just the way that I use Revit and find it professionally useful, at least in terms of studio, right? And I know some of you guys, of course, have started to actually use that for your competition project, which is great. But what's nice is, again, we can still further control the viewport, right? We don't necessarily have to just end up with whatever Revit gives us. I'll go ahead and hit WT again, or actually just put these back. I don't have enough screen space on this tiny little laptop to just do 3 views at a time. And it's going to make it a little harder to see in the recording. So we'll go ahead and just focus on one viewport. But that's looking pretty good. If say this was the view, I wanted to go with it. It's starting to really show the relationship between the ground and the space inside the building. That's wonderful. Now, here's the next tricky part. And it's just kind of the way that Revit tackles the line weight component of our drawings. So what's interesting about Revit is it's trying to be a couple of programs. It's not only trying to be Rhino, but it's also trying to be Illustrator at the same time and help you control some of the vector qualities of these lines. So if you type in VG, which stands for Visual Graphics, you might want to write that one down. It's definitely a great command that you use all the time. And keep in mind also that each of the visual graphics are different for each of these views. So I mentioned that last time. We have section 2 and say, we'll go down and get another section as well. All right, we have section 1 and section 2. Keep in mind that my VG graphics or my visual graphics for this page will have to be changed also, right? Now, don't get me wrong, there are ways we can just copy the same visual graphics to every single viewport. But you kind of have to get used to it first. I'll let you find that out on your own if you are so pleased or inclined. However, we'll type in VG. No enter sign, it's just those two letters. I know it's kind of weird in Revit, but it is really just those two letters, no enter, no space bar, which I do all the time because of Rhino. However, we'll need to change some things. And let's go ahead and explain this one because it's kind of a hefty chart. A little bit hard to see. So hopefully you got it open. Good. I see Leah has it open. Looks like Andrew may have it open. Are you following along, Jackie? Working diligently in the background. Okay, well, at least that's good. However, this one's kind of hard to see, right? So if you take a look, it's got everything. I mean, my goodness, it's got the air terminals, for goodness sake, and we don't even have air terminals. Do you guys know what air terminals are? Pop quiz? Look it up, right? However, I mean, there's so many, even just vocabulary, right? If you didn't know what a conduit was, now's the time, right? And of course, that has much more to do with electricity. I think data services, detail items. Obviously, some of these things are maybe a little foreign, right, to say the least. Again, it's a construction document program. So, of course, a lot of these things pertain to actually not architecture and actually more MEP and engineering. So keep that in mind that it's kind of all together in one system. All right, so we need to add poche to our section. Now, we don't do that manually in Revit, right? Like in Illustrator, we would just draw it, or in Rhino, we would just draw it. However, in Revit, we just basically tell the coding of this BIM model to be different. And this is, of course, the way that it's coded. So in our case, the visibility graphics overrides for section 1, right? Definitely says it at the top. And we have a couple of tabs. In our case, we're just going to need the models categories, right? And in our case, we just need floors, structural elements, maybe some walls. Obviously, some of those elements need poche. In my case, I work a little smarter, not harder. So I'm going to actually select a few. So you'll see that we have the item, then we have the projection surface, and we can control the lines, the poche, and it's called pattern here, and the transparency. And then when the item in question is cut, we can control the line weight of that cut, and of course the poche or pattern of that cut. We can even half tone it. You know, if we find that it's too saturated, that's a really good feature. I wish Photoshop and other programs had that, but we can half tone it immediately, and we can even change its detail level, such as maybe it's showing too many components. Like we load in, say, a boat, right? It's got the decal stickers, but we don't need the decal stickers. So we can control the level of detail. Again, this is a construction document, right? So not so much of this stuff applies, and I'm trying to keep it relevant. So let's go ahead and poche the wall. So I'm going to click on this override category for the poche and the cut. I'll go ahead and click on that, right? And you'll see it actually brings up another window. However, I want to do all these at the same time, and I want to make sure it's the same poche color, right? So I'm going to make sure I have walls. I'm going to make sure I have topography. So I'm going to hold shift, or sorry, command. And I'm going to select the ones that I need. In my case, I do have structural framing. I'm going to go ahead and select that. I do cut through my stairs, so I definitely want to make sure my stair category is in there. Rooms, you know, I don't want to poche a room. That would be silly. Obviously, want to leave that as space. I might have some railings. So again, just kind of clicking the categories that you know that you're cutting through, right? So in my case, not a lot of this. Floors, definitely good. And nicely enough, it is in alphabetical order. So if you can't find it, say we're looking for the doors, the roofs. Obviously, we could just use our alphabet. Now, what's nice about this is now I just click on one of these overrides, and it's going to actually apply it to each of those that I selected. In my case, 2023 is a little bit new. If you have an older version, there's kind of just one option here. However, in our case, for poche, there's not really a foreground or a background. You can honestly change either one of these and it'll do the same thing, just because it is the poche. Now, this is where it gets kind of fun. You can use a hatch. I mean, like I said, this is a construction document, so very often we have to show the details of the materials that are actually going on in a project. So as you can see, we have concrete, aluminum, and all different types of hatches to indicate that, right? Sort of a symbology, right? Very similar to what you would do in graphics 1 or graphics 2. Instead of those line poche, now you don't have to draw any of those lines. Don't get me wrong. There's a reason people fall in love with Revit, I think, and it's because of that ease, right? Of not having to draw all of these things so manually. However, we'll go with solid fill for today. And the reason I selected all of those at the same time was, of course, so I can match this color. I find it a little easier to just kind of, yeah, fake it till I make it in terms of finding the right color. But what's nice is, of course, we have this number bar down here. So just in case you needed the actual digital color, you can simply copy it and paste it into the new one. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't want to do all that. So I just want to press OK and apply. And as you can see, it got most things. However, it didn't get our building pad. So I do want to show you what happens when it doesn't exactly work. And unfortunately, on the projector, it doesn't look quite poché, does it? It's kind of silly. Maybe it's missing that color gray. It's VGA after all. You know, we're used to 16.7 million colors in a projector. Unfortunately, VGA does not have 16.7 million colors to give us. It only has 256. So quite limited. Anyway, that's the reason that gray isn't showing up. However, let's pick another color, right? I mean, it is just for studio. Maybe I really want my poche to stand out. Maybe I've got a color scheme going on and I don't even need to choose gray, right? So in my case, unfortunately, I do have to select each of those again. What's nice is it's kind of already indicated for me. So I can kind of just look at the ones that I've changed and kind of go along. Select my floors again. Doors. I guess I didn't get windows last time, so maybe we get that one. Perfect. And I just need to click on it again. So I'll change that override. And actually, one of my professors back at Texas Tech, he used to love burnt orange because, of course, he went to UT. So all of his poche was burnt orange. And maybe that color will actually show up a little bit better on the projector. So let's see. Go ahead and apply. And as you can see, definitely much better on the projector. However, it's still, again, missing some of those elements. So I didn't actually catch the number of that orange that I got. So just in case I actually needed to go back, again, I'd hit VG and simply see what colors are being used in this viewport. That's really helpful because what if I get a project from somebody else, especially in the real practical sense? If I'm working at a firm, if we're on Revit, very often there's 12 other people actually working on the same model. So very often some of the stuff or the color choices or somebody else actually chooses those things. I need to hit VG so I can see what somebody else did, right? Or possibly match that color on another drawing. So in my case, I'll double click on that and there it is, 255, 128, and of course 000. That's pretty easy to remember. So I think 255, 128, not too bad. So for instance, in some of these elements where they didn't get pochade, I may have missed that category and that's fine. So in my case, I'm gonna go ahead and override it by element. I don't want to choose category because I don't want to accidentally do it to all the elements in my drawing. So in my case, I'll just go by element. And just in case you missed that, sorry, I didn't call that out. You want to right click on the element in question, override graphics, and by element. So we'll go ahead and do that. Again, same process. We'll switch it to solid fill. And in my case, that number was 255 and 128 and 000. The exact color, right? And it doesn't look like it changed anything. Why did it not? Turn the background on for a second. Oh, do you guys see where I messed up? So I accidentally did it to the surface pattern. Well, of course, it's not going to show the surface pattern. It's being cut, right? However, I should change that. I'm going to leave it just so maybe in another view, maybe that, that comes up just to kind of see what that does. However, keep in mind that you're in the right category. Now, by default, it does sort of break these down, but let's go ahead and actually show the default view. So again, it's just like the visual graphics, except it's in a different interface. Again, I don't know why Revit's so confusing, but we do have a couple of options. They're just being displayed in a different way, right? It's the same thing as the VG graphics window, but can't change the surface pattern. I have to change the cut pattern, right? That would be the pochette. If I could change pattern to pochette, that would help me a lot, but I'm not a computer scientist. Although I hear you can actually change a lot to Revit that way, which is again, why I only teach the basics of Revit, because usually at a firm, they kind of have an IT guy for Revit, right? And they're going to teach you and train you how they want you to use Revit, right? And it's usually based on how they, maybe they have their own components that they always use, certain doors or certain elements that they always use in their design. So it doesn't make sense to do those over and over again, but of course have their own firm catalog, which is much more Alamo Architects, or even the place that I worked at, Capstone in Austin. Cornerstone. Sorry, almost forgot their name. Anyway, so let's get that color and continue. 255, 128, and 000. And as you can see, it changes it beautifully. What's interesting also is in this view, what's really nice is if I make changes here, it changes the rest of the model, right? What we're really looking at here is actually a digital model, even though it's just being projected as a two-dimensional drawing, right? So, I mean, it's kind of a blessing and a curse. If I accidentally move something in here, it's horrible. I'm suddenly like, what did I do wrong? And what view did I do it wrong? However, it can be useful. For instance, in my case, my floor is too low, and I can immediately just use my arrows and change it, right, to be a much more successful section, right? I can further get into the detail in terms of establishing levels and things like that. So maybe I want a little bit more context. If I was following Escamilla's rule, I usually give myself a third here and a third there, right to the extents of the building. I probably don't want this this border, so of course I'm gonna take that off with our show crop region, and it'll say hide crop region if you of course want to hide it. I'm going to switch it to fine because that's just kind of a good rule to have, because you get all the elements drawn, such as those wonderful rafters that we did last time. So yeah, I can further refine the drawing, right? And well, it even reveals some of the things that are maybe in the drawing still, such as my DWG, right? As you can see in our properties. Now I don't want to delete it because again, if I delete it in this view, it deletes it in the whole project. So maybe I just want to hide it in this view. That's fairly simple. I right click, override view by element. And at the very top, you'll see something that says visible. Obviously, if I uncheck that, it'll be invisible. I'll go ahead and hit apply. And it's of course going to clean up my lines a little bit better. I've also noticed my windows are a little bit out of sync in terms of their alignment. So again, in this view, it's kind of nice. I couldn't necessarily do that in my floor plan view, right? Because of, well, in my case, maybe the windows are above the section line, or sorry, the floor plan line. However, of course, in section view, I can further change and develop those. So this is definitely section. Funny enough, it's about the same for each view. However, you see, I just hit DI for dimensions. And it's a dream when it comes to making construction documents. However, I will say I can't remember a single studio where I had to make a construction document except my construction documents class of my second year of master's, right? So again, this is why I say it's best to kind of teach this in a very basic way, because at the end of the day, it is for construction documents. And what is nice is Revit will teach you a lot, right? So, I mean, I would definitely encourage, when you see that word conduit and you don't know what it means, go look it up, because it's definitely worth your time. And it allows you to have that program even teach you. So I think we've nailed down sections, right? I can't remember if I loaded any scale figures. Let me check. So I hit CM. What's nice about, of course, CM is, again, we can still place components in here. So I don't know, maybe I want a different TV. Of course, I can place that TV. It'll tell me, hey, it's actually got to be placed on a floor. And that's maybe because of the way the model's made. We could get in that too, but let's go ahead and get this view on a sheet, because that's important too. However, even if I close it, it's not going to magically go away. We still have it. And actually, there's our previous section. So here it is, at least in without talking, right? Hitting VG, doors, floors, roofs, stairs, topography, walls, windows, override, color. And just like that. So as you can see, at least without all the talking, it takes a matter of 15 seconds. Something that would take us how long in Illustrator? Well, not too long, but arguably we're saving a little bit more time here. And after all, in architecture, it eventually becomes very practical, and you've probably heard it before, time equals money. So there's a reason architecture has kind of pushed its way towards these computer programs. However, at the same time, as you guys know from San Antonio College, and of course, freehand drawing, and of course, even drafting things by hand, you know that the level of character these lines should have. How do you get that exactly in Revit? So first, let's get it to a sheet, right? Because I do want to show a couple of things of at least how we can get it out of Revit and even further use it to where it doesn't have to look like Revit, right? What's nice is it is a vector program, just like AutoCAD or just like Rhino. So it can export lines to be changed with their line weights. However, it's a scary process, to be honest, because I'll show you what it looks like. So let's get it on a sheet first. We'll go down to our project browser. And we'll go down to sheets. In my case, went too far. Sheet category. And I see I have a section. Wonderful. It almost looks too easy. We just drag and drop. Even better, it's already to scale. I know, Revit makes it almost too easy. But you have to know a little bit about architecture before you can really get into Revit. However, that's pretty good. Maybe I can fit actually 2 sections on there, but I don't want to fit that actually. Maybe that will fit at a larger scale. Right now it's at 1 foot equals 10 feet, or sorry, 1 inch equals 10 feet. I'll click on my scales and quite literally choose one. In my case, let's try 1/8. A little bit bigger. Okay, looks like we can fit a little bit more. Now, don't get me wrong, you guys know just as well as I do that if we were drafting this, there's a lot more planning involved, right? We have to almost kind of see how much space we have on the sheet available, right, per the size of the page. And we could really nail it down. Of course, that's what we already did in Rhino. So I like to show you both the manual way, just in case these systems fail you, but also the automatic way. That way you can save some time too. Let's keep going though. So 1/8, let's try 3/16. Even though I'm not a huge fan of 3/16, I don't think anybody is. Like anybody thinks in 3/16. Probably not somebody you want to talk to, but they're probably an engineer straight away. But that's actually fitting pretty good, right? At least to the extent of our paper. I can even further double click on that viewport and I accidentally hit it. Well, I can bring it right back, right? I can hide my crop region and of course show my crop region. So it's kind of working like Photoshop in that way, right? The crop tool, right? So in my case, maybe I don't want my levels to fall off the page. And I'll go ahead and hide that region again, just so I can know that, well, yeah, don't get me wrong. In the real world, this usually just gets stapled on and kind of folded into the set sheet anyway. But you know, at least the architects I work with, they kind of allow that space to be used. Of course, check with your architect that you work with. For the sake of studio, like I said, or at least the sake of this project, test it out. I want to, you know, see you manipulate this program, see if you can achieve what you actually want to get, which is a challenge in itself with Revit. We'll double click on the outside of our viewport to go back into the sheet, right? So you'll notice that the sheet component and the viewport are two different components, right? You'll have to double click to activate it and move parts. And you have to double click on the outside. Now, this is where it gets kind of dangerous. For instance, I might accidentally draw on this and I think that it's in the viewport, but it's not. It's actually in the sheet. Just be very careful where you're drawing and when you move stuff around, right? Because very often if I accidentally move something in this view, it could very well mean I accidentally moved a floor in my entire BIM model, right? So, of course, do be careful. We do have edit undo. So, of course, like all digital programs, we do have the ability to go back in time. So, not the end of the world. However, to move this little title block, you'll just click on it quite directly. Pretty intuitive on that one. However, if you want to shorten the line, you have to click on the viewport just to get this little ball so I can move it across. I went ahead and loaded actually a couple. I went with a viewport title list. So just in case you don't want it to have a name, some people don't like perspectives having names. They like the perspective to speak for itself. And in my case, if you're hard of seeing, we definitely like larger font texts, right? So that we can, of course, see some of the elements. Again, what's amazing, guys, Revit does a lot of the work for us. Look, it already says what name it is, section 1, and it even says the scale that it is, and it even references to the page, right? So take a look at this. All right, let's go to the section itself. Such as right now, it doesn't have anything located on its annotation. And if I drag in my other section, it's going to automatically update it. It's going to say that it's number 2 on page architecture 30, right? And lo and behold, it's on page architecture 30, and it happens to be also number 2. Pretty amazing. I know that probably doesn't sound so amazing to you just because you guys are so used to a heavily sort of automated world. However, we used to draw this all in CAD, and you better believe I was the guy sort of sitting there on every page, checking and making sure every reference was the exact same reference. Because again, those are important. Those are eventually what would go to a contractor, and he or she's going to read that and go, okay, I'm looking for section 2. The reason I bring this up, guys, is it's a continuation of graphics 1, graphics 2, graphics 3, graphics 4. Our communication graphically means something. It could very well mean somebody accidentally builds something else if it's not communicating, of course, in the right standards. Now, what's nice about Revit is it's really trying to help you with those standards, enough to even make it completely automated. Anyway, maybe not very useful for studio, but again, I think very telling of where computer programs are going for architecture, right? They're doing and helping us in a lot of ways. And at least in school, Revit tends to teach us a few things even, whether it be the vocabulary or even the construction process. And why we're important in that process, by the way. It's symbiotic. However, we're reaching towards the hour. So I do just have a few more things. Let's face it, there's always something to say about Revit, but I don't want to make these videos too long so that they're a little bit easier to digest. I did mention that I do want to show you how to export these and of course print them, right? So just in case we got to a point that, I want to use it today. Maybe I don't finish the modeling. I don't find all the furniture. Maybe I don't establish everything to my design, but this would be definitely enough to print out to scale. And I could draw them on top, maybe an overlay of trace paper, and even produce my own elevations or sections or floor plans, right? Again, I think that is one of the smartest ways to use Revit, at least in your first 4 years of architectural design. Anyway, let's go ahead and perform that. Pretty simple. In my case, you can use the command, which is Control P for print, right? However, it is also in File and Print. And of course, we get a couple of options. We get Print Preview, Batch Print. Most of these we don't actually need. After all, it is for like a set, right? If I'm printing like 42 copies of something, it's definitely helpful to print it out as a batch rather than just individually sit there and print each time. So different tools for different occasions, right? So just be aware of that. We'll go ahead and hit print. In my case, you'll want to install one of the best little free programs that I found, and it's called Cute, as in wow, that Japanese Hello Kitty is very cute. PDF Writer, right? So you definitely want to write that down. It's free, and we can actually take a look at it real quick. But what's nice is, well, especially if your Adobe Suite doesn't work on my Windows side, like if your Adobe Suite is having a hard time opening on your Windows side, like mine does sometimes, this is a really great alternative to Adobe Acrobat. Now, you can't view PDFs with it. However, you can print PDFs with it, which again is very useful for what we're doing, right? Maybe I don't want an actual physical print, but maybe I want the digital print first, so well, I can manipulate it in Illustrator first and then print it, as you guys know about our workflow. So QPDF Writer, yep, it's a free product, right? Don't pay for it, of course, free. And it's essentially a digital printer, right? So I'll show you how it works. We'll go over to properties, right? I'll basically select it like a printer. In my case, it's called the printer that's QPDF Writer. I'll click on properties and I'll choose a couple things. By default, it's kind of just that landscape and certain elements. I'm going to go ahead and hit advance. And again, why I like it is because it has almost every paper size known to man. And then we can even choose custom sizes, which is not exactly always free. So again, QPDF Writer is really going above and beyond, giving us some free tools. However, in my case, the sheets that I gave you guys are 24 by 36. Does anybody know what size paper that is? Well, it is technically a 2x3. I hear large. Yeah, it's definitely large. It's the same size as your final model, right? 2x3. It's an Arc D. Oh, Arch. Yeah. No, that's I say Arch as well. But yeah, it definitely has them all, right? Arch A, Arch B, Arch C. Honestly, I forgot what Arch E1 is. Again, what I like about Revit and especially these digital programs, I'll go look these up in Google and suddenly I know everything about paper sizes, you know? So again, when in doubt, take a pause and look it up, right? There's no use in being sort of just confused about these programs all the time. Now, keep in mind that increases the time with these programs. So doing that due diligence now in school is definitely more beneficial to you than sort of rushing it when you're sort of on the clock, right? So learn these things now. Anyway, we'll choose Arc D, right? And that's pretty much all we have to change here. Of course, it'll be in landscape. We'll press OK. And essentially, we just set up the printer. I know, probably the easiest printer setup you've experienced. And of course, it always changes per location that you are, right? For instance, at San Antonio College, you guys know that we have GoPrint. And such as Texas Tech, you'd actually send it to our print shop and they'll print it out for you. So very often we would just give them a file. We wouldn't even really go over this process. So again, you're getting a little bit more, hopefully that way you're able to adapt to whatever college or institution that you go to next, right? Because, well, it might be different than here. So we've already got our setup of the printer. We'll click on the setup of the settings. In my case, I helped you out a little bit and I changed the default of the file that you downloaded. So again, it's very important that you use that file that I gave you guys, that template. That's of course still on our Google Drive, just in case you haven't opened it. But yes, I've already made a preset for you, 24 by 36 PDF. But we do need to check some things. For instance, we need to make sure zoom is at 100%. Now, zoom at 100% is a really weird way of saying the same scale, right? And that's pretty important too, because, well, sometimes I have a professor or a colleague that goes, well, I need this at 25%. I need this at 50%. And I can see why they've kind of left it this way, right? Because it's very easy to just go, okay, 50%, right? Instead of changing the scale, you'd think Revit with all the scales, it would actually have some sort of component right here that says, oh, just change the scale. Unfortunately, it doesn't. We have to know a little bit about our percentages. However, just never use fit to page. That is one way to ruin the scale of any Revit drawing. Like I said, Revit's already doing a lot of stuff for us, and that includes scale. So if we always just hit fit to page, it's a train wreck of trying to get it back, or you're sitting there checking every single print. Anyway, do make sure that it says zoom, and of course, 100%. Also, paper placement is center. I mean, that kind of just makes sense. Obviously, it's going to say, hey, where do you want it on the page? Of course, in the center, right? And in fact, there's not even another option. So again, some of these things I wonder what they're really needed for. Could just be outdated design, but we're going to go ahead and press OK, and we can hit preview to see what it looks like. Awesome. So we got the title block, we got all these different components. Yep, it's got my pieces. That's great. I'm going to hit print, and it's actually going to go back to this window so that I can press OK. Now, the way Qt PDF Writer works is basically it's sending it to a digital printer. It's not a real printer. However, you'll notice it takes a little time based on, well, the amount of information that you're printing. A little window pops up, Qt PDF Writer, and it's basically going, okay, made it for you. Where would you like to save that PDF? I'll go ahead and just stick it on my desktop for now, and of course, label it accordingly. In my case, I'll just call it my test print. Make sure that it's a PDF, and keep in mind, it only does make PDFs. It won't make a JPEG or anything like that. Not that you would even want a JPEG, so. But what's nice, we can open that PDF in Illustrator. And of course, manipulate the line weights and do all kinds of things to them, or even open it up in Rhino, right? And actually continue the digital model there. Again, definitely useful in Studio in that case. Last but not least, I did want to show you that you can also export it as a DWG, just in case, again, maybe you want to manipulate the layers in a different way, or possibly take it to another program. It is slightly different. So what's weird is, well, it doesn't actually matter what page I'm on. It's kind of a system in itself. So we'll go to File, we'll go to Export. And as you can see, there's quite a bit of exporting, right? Honestly, to this day, I am still uncertain what an IFC model is, and I just don't even want to know, right? But in our case, we need the CAD formats, and there's quite a few. In our case, we'll want a DWG if we want to open it up in Rhino. We'll need a DXF if we want to open it up in a laser cutter. We'll need a DNG if we want to use Inventor. Again, like I said, this isn't just for the architects, it's for the MEP engineers, it's for all these different file types. And let's face it, guys, who are you going to be buddies with? Who are you going to be working with when you make these buildings, when you design these buildings? Those contractors, those MEPs, those engineers. And it's going to be really useful, at least in your case, to know that terminology. So again, that vocabulary is important. Anyway, DWG, we'll go ahead and select that. And this is what I meant by different. So by default, it's of course going to bring up the sheet that I was on. However, I can click on New Set, which is what we call sort of our construction document. Right, so in my case, I'll say Set 1, and I can select all the views that I want to be on that set, right? In my case, this is kind of a tool that's obviously useful for transferring to AutoCAD, right? If you know anything about XREFs, it's kind of just outdated terminology now. In fact, there's so many architects and architectural firms that are pushing for Revit now, which again, why we even touch upon this project. Because it's definitely a great way to get a job. Hey, they're going to ask you, have you touched Revit before? Are you comfortable with Revit? And you're going to be able to go, yeah, I'm comfortable with it, at least with a straighter face than, no, I've never touched it, I'm terrified, right? Then, you know, obviously maybe at the beginning of this class, how you felt about Revit. Anyway, I think I've shown enough little magical things where you can definitely see the potential and the excitement that others have for Revit. Anyway, let's say it was a section and it was sheet A30. I'll go ahead and select that sheet and click next. In my case, it's that simple, right? I'll choose 2018 DWG. In my case, I'll call it test lines again. And press OK. Now, unfortunately, on my Windows side of my computer, I don't have the Adobe Suite installed, so I can't really show that per se yet. However, we've already covered that extensively, of course, in Project 1 and Project 2. So yeah, I don't think you'll need that for the video. However, I will end it at about 45 minutes on this one. However, before I end it, were there any questions that came up, right? Obviously, this is a large program. I go pretty fast. Of course, that's why I record it. So you can pause and further look into actually what I clicked on sometimes, right? Because there's so many buttons. Anyway, anything that I didn't cover? Question, Andrew, Leah, Jackie? Remember, this is an opportunity to actually get your question on video, right? Just so you can kind of reference it, right? It's kind of a nice little picture. No questions? Next time, write them down, because I know you have questions about Revit, and I know they pop up. So it makes more sense to get it so that it can help everybody, right? Anyway, we'll leave it at that for today if there are no questions. Let's go ahead and work side by side. I will say the next thing we want to take a look at, I know we saw Andrew's, but Jackie, Leah, I know there's only 3 of us today. You already got your sketches on there? Let's take a look then. However, we don't need that for the recording, so let's go ahead and stop screen share. And it looks like it actually recorded today. I think Zoom is going to be the winner for Windows. Stop share.